In the last couple of years, AI tools have shaken up the software industry. But there is a growing discrepancy between how engineers at startups and solo founders and enterprise engineers on the other side are experiencing and working with these tools. Developers who are working in startups and smaller companies, they find them incredibly useful. They allow them to iterate fast, they can ship features quickly, and they're very happy with the results that they get out of LLMs. Software engineers working in big corporations often find them to be nothing more than fancy autocomplete. And today I want to talk about why this is the case. Let's take a step back and start from startups. Now, a startup is essentially a company that has not yet reached product market fit. It's a company that is trying to solve a problem. It has a solution to a problem its potential customers have, and it's trying to find the proper way, to market it to people and the proper way to solve the problems that they have. And one thing that's very important for startups is iteration. So startups want to have, they want to have a quick way with which they can test out new features with their customers. Now, you're trying to solve a specific problem. You're not sure how your customers are going to react. You're not sure whether they will like what you're building. So you want to have, this has always been a problem in this environment. You want to be able to scaffold the feature quickly, get it in front of people, even if it's a prototype, even if it's a demo, get it in front of someone, get feedback, see how they use it, see if they're happy with it, and then iterate and improve and change or even scrap the whole feature altogether if it doesn't make sense. So LLMs are very good when it comes to building prototypes because they have a large context when it comes to how software is built. So if you are not too specific about what you want to create, you can use the LLM to quickly put together the functionality. Maybe you want to build some CRUD API with a Redis cache or something, and you can build this relatively quickly, especially if you don't have very specific requirements about how this thing has to behave or how it has to look or how it has to be structured, what design patterns to be used, and things like that. When I'm helping my friends with their startups, they don't have established requirements about how their software has to be structured, how it has to be deployed, what CI pipeline has to be used, how everything needs to be put together. They just want to iterate and see whether this thing that they're building makes sense. They don't care if you're using an object-oriented style of a more functional style of programming. They don't care if you're using the proper design patterns. What is important for them is the end product, the end thing that the user sees and the end thing that they interact with. It's important that this serves the correct purpose. And if you describe what you want to achieve to an LLM, it can give you a pretty good result. And startups are, optimizing for speed because often they have very limited runway. They've got an investment that can sustain them for a year, and in that year they have to try out enough things in order for them to find product market fit, to find customers, in order to get some revenue, to get the ball going, potentially get another round, or try to sustain, naturally. But corporations, on the other hand, have a very different goal. When you're working in a large company, think about companies that have hundreds, thousands of employees, maybe in different places across the globe. What they're looking for is not speed, they're looking for longevity. They've grown so big because they have product market fit. They know that they're building something. They have their customers. They have a backlog of features that their customers want. They've got plans for growth. For them, it's important to build software in a way that will sustain the company for the next decade or two. When this is the case, you're no longer optimizing for iterations. You're no longer optimizing for speed. What you want is good maintainability and good extensibility. You want to have software that can be maintained by any engineer in the company. And that's why, design patterns are so important in enterprise development. That's why, good structure, established practices, and in general, standards and rules are so important because everybody has to be able to contribute. And when you're moving from one team to another, you don't want to be looking all confused you don't understand anything in the code base. You want the code bases to follow a standard, so when you move from one team to another, you can easily understand what's going on. Companies tend to have a lot of context, a lot of domain-specific context that LLMs just don't have. LLMs are incredible at writing code, and they're very good helpers when it comes to building software. But in a corporation, there is just a lot of knowledge that is passed from one engineer to another engineer, like how to structure this application, which library do you use. Like there, many companies have internal libraries that they use in place of common like open source libraries for maybe, I don't know, security purposes or compliance purposes or like other purposes. I don't know. Like for example, if you're building a UI, if you are just, if you're a startup, you can quickly put together something using ShadCN, V0, and you can have like a scaffolded UI in like no time. But if you're in a corporation, imagine that there's like an internal component library that has its own API, and the LLM doesn't have the context about that library, and you're like put together a screen and it puts something together, but then you have to replace like half of it because it doesn't use the correct components, and you have to maintain that visual language. If I want to have like some service that does event-based messaging, I can quickly put together something with an LLM that just uses Redis's pops-up functionality. In a corporation, you're most likely using a specific vendor. So maybe you have made the decision that you're going to use Kafka, and you have made the decision that you're going to have like an internal client that takes care of like things like authentication and like schema parsing and stuff like that. And the LLM just doesn't have that context. Like if you put it in a code base, it can derive some of it, but it's going to be as good as being able to finish the things, like being able to finish the code that you start to write. And that's why many people in more enterprisey environments are finding them nothing more than useful autocomplete, because it's just hard to put all this context. Like imagine if I want to build a CI pipeline for like a new Go service, I can quickly, just open a YAML file and give Cursor a prompt, and it's going to have everything that I need. But like in a corporate environment, you're most likely using custom runners that have their own API and their own configuration parameters. And you're going to be better off just opening another repository and copying the code from there, instead of, by the time you tell Cursor all the context that it needs to have, then you're just gonna copy paste it. Here's like the paradox: you can most probably find like a way to specify all this context and give it to the LLM that you're using, but this is still not a solved problem. Like I can give it like a URL, like docs or a description of what I want to achieve, and I can give it like the repository of our internal library that I wanted to use. But it's not just one thing, there are multiple things that have to be taken into account when you're building software in a corporate environment. I think this is an entire niche for products in the future. But yeah, so I don't know what's the best way to solve this. Like I'm trying to pass on more context when I wanted to achieve something, but I'm just finding it like I haven't found a way to reuse this context across projects or across repositories, and that's why many people still complain about hallucinations. If you've got some context that it's not having, it can easily hallucinate APIs, and I find that this happens very often with the internal libraries that I use at my current job. Yeah, so it's an interesting conundrum. What's the solution? I don't know. I'm sure that these tools are going to get better in the future, and you're probably going to have a way to feed them like with company context and with information about repositories, and you're going to allow them to like index your code. But have in mind that some large companies don't want to have their they don't want their proprietary code and libraries and tooling to be indexed by LLMs. Like they don't want this leaking outside of the company. If you've built like some private tool that you're using internally to solve specific domain-specific problems, like maybe you don't want to have this. You don't want the chance of this functionality leaking. If you're an engineer in like a large company, the best way to try out the full capabilities of something like Cursor is to put together a greenfield project without following any of the guidelines that you have at work right now. Like just try to put something together quickly, and you will see how powerful this is when you want to prototype stuff. Yeah, we're not going to talk about maintainability, extensibility, and the importance of design patterns here. It's just going to be this. So yeah, I'm Alex. Thank you for watching.